Good morning. Thanks to all of you for being here. There are a lot of interesting sessions going on presently, so appreciate your attendance. You know from the title, School Bands Ignore, Intermingle, or Inspire, a little bit about what we might speak about this morning. Primarily, this session is to do two things. First of all, summarize what occurred last summer in the symposium that was held at Arizona State for CBDNA. And secondly, to hopefully provoke some discussion amongst you and perhaps eventually a wider group about what CBDNA's role should be, could be, in the continuing education, those who will educate public schools. So yesterday we heard quite a bit about developing what Frederick Fennell coined the liberal artist, thanks to Sam and Shelley. What struck me about that was that this is not the first time I heard that idea, but I've been thinking that that's kind of the way we set the symposium up. That was a part of our proposal, was along the lines of thinking about how do we create a liberal band director, so to speak. In other words, teachers and conductors who are both excellent conductor pedagogues and are prepared to be innovative entrepreneurs. Because I really believe, and I'm sure not all of you will agree with this, I believe that our students have to be, if anything, better than we are as conductors and pedagogues to achieve the same level of success. And at the same time, they have to be creative and innovative because the rate of change continues to accelerate, not only in the world, but in educational paradigms of all kinds. So last summer's symposium was designed to pilot a few ideas that might contribute to the creating of this model of the liberal band director. To that end, we had sessions in conducting and pedagogy. We had sessions using regarding how to use technology both in established ensembles, but also how to create classes that were specifically rooted in technology. I'm thinking about this idea a lot these days, that the whole movement of the 99%, thinking about we need a movement with the 90%. That is the 90% of the kids in every school that we don't teach. And in some schools it's, of course, lower than that. In some schools it's higher than that. But the truth is, we all are very sensitive these days, I hope, about biases that have to do with gender, race, and so on. But I wonder how sensitive we are about the bias within our own schools about not being willing, able, or even thinking about the other 90%. For me, as I get older, that becomes more of a bias that I'm aware of and concerned about for us in the future. So technology, courses rooted in technology, I think are part of the solution to addressing how we go about not just having wonderful wind bands and orchestras and choirs, of course, jazz ensembles and so on, but how we go about addressing the other 90%. Finally, the symposium was an attempt in some ways to return to our roots of 100 years ago, our roots as pedagogues in schools. When the school band movement first began, just prior to World War I, and certainly accelerated after World War I, a good deal of the idea behind bands in schools was to use them as vehicles for social good. At that point, they were vehicles to keep kids in school because there were no compulsory requirements for kids to be in school, and there was a lot of concern in particular about males, who were dropping out. Females at that point stayed in school longer in general, or in many cases in cities. So in some ways, we talked about social engagement as a vehicle to improve um, to revision, if you will, our ensembles as more than just making wonderful music, as using that music as a tool to enliven our communities and our schools. We were fortunate to have a really wonderful faculty with us. We hosted an NBA Young Composer Conductor event right before our symposium. They were overlapping by a day, so Paula Kreider and Mark Camphouse stayed on for a couple of days to also be a part of the CBDNA symposium. We were very, very fortunate. Frank Battisti was initially going to be one of the people working as a conducting guru, and Frank had to pull out because of surgery for his wife, but Dick and Cheryl Floyd were gracious enough not long before the symposium to both come and be a part of it. And then many of our CBDNA colleagues who attended also work with conductors one-on-one or in a group situation, including Eric Brownbach, Eric Hammer, and Emily Trinan. So we were very, very fortunate to have all of those people as a part of our session. Technology was handled by one of my colleagues, Evan Tobias, and also a gentleman you're going to meet in just a moment, Dan Berard. And then Ron Wakefield truly blessed us with his presence and spoke to us about the social engagement programs that he's doing in his middle school in the middle of Los Angeles. You're going to hear about that shortly. So in the next few minutes, Dan is going to speak to us about a high school program that he runs in Fort Collins, Colorado, that I think is an exemplary program for the use of technology. Dan uses technology both in traditional ensembles, but also has developed a sensational media program. Carrie Pawelski, who's finishing her thesis right now on Ron Wakefield and on music for social causes, is going to talk to us about Ron's work, and then Dick Floyd is going to speak about, give us a quick summary in his words of what transpired over the week. After that, again, I hope there are lots of questions, and I hope we can engage in an interesting discussion about CBDNA and its role as an organization in the future of our students. Okay, without further ado, Serena, let's get Dan on board. Please welcome from Fossil Ridge High School in Fort Collins, Colorado, this is Dan Berard.
Good morning, all.
Good morning, Dan.
Oh,
There we go.
fortunate to be a part of the symposium, and we've been very lucky at Fossil Ridge High School. First and foremost, it was a new school when I got on board, and it was we were really challenged to think a little differently about how we approach the ensembles, and so that really led to a focus on new way of bringing technology to the ensemble. And so we've got two parallel pathways going through our music program right now. We have the traditional ensembles, and first and foremost, we were very interested in making sure that we had fine performing ensembles in the traditional sense, and I think we're doing very well at that. But we're also with that encouraged very strongly to find ways to innovate what can be sometimes a program of pedagogy that can sometimes be stuck a little bit. So through that, we've been really challenged, as my principal puts it, to develop our technology toolbox into our tech toy. And I think that's an important distinction. We start looking for future educators, maybe the role between current directors, college, education program, and certainly the ensemble at the college level. How do we, our next generation of educators, think of the integration of technology as just organic outgrowth of their pedagogy instead of kind of novelty or distraction. What's really about is
Dan, we're going to take a second and try to reconnect because you're breaking up more.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Let's just try to reconnect. While we're doing that, I should mention Dan is very modest when he introduces his program. This is a high school program that is really does do it all. They have an incredible jazz band. Their concert band has appeared at Music for All and other national festivals. Their marching band is 3 times in a row state champions, and they're doing these other things. So we're speaking with somebody who understands and puts first and foremost the traditional programs that we all embrace, and then adds to that. So hopefully we will get a better connection. Sorry. Yes, we tested this twice and it was great. Okay.
Okay, hopefully that will work. Is that a little better for everybody? Okay. Well, thank you. I'll just kind of start from the top again. Foster Ridge was a new school when I came to it. I was lucky enough to be part of the core team, and from the beginning, we were really challenged to think a little differently about the role of technology within our instruction. And one of the kind of catchphrases we have at the school is, how does technology enhance your teaching toolbox instead of your teaching toy box? And I think what can happen a lot of times is technology is viewed as maybe a little bit of a distraction from the traditional ensemble, and when it does that, it takes on an air of novelty and loses some of its effectiveness. So I think one of the things we tried to focus on at the symposium, and one of the things I'm really kind of committed to right now, is certainly helping my peers, and then I think having a larger discussion with the music education programs at the collegiate level, and our ensemble directors on how do we get our current generation of band directors as well as our future generation of band directors to look at technology as a really organic outgrowth of really sound pedagogy. I use the phrase a lot that there's no amount of technology that can make up for bad pedagogy. And so what we've really tried to find within the ensembles is having really high performing ensembles, but then finding ways that technology can enhance the pedagogy that we have within those groups instead of distract from that. And so whether that's being smartboard technology and video projector, things like that, use of apps or smart music or recording devices, or Skyping with composers of works that we're performing on, we really have kind of an overarching philosophy of how we integrate that I think works a little bit more seamlessly within the framework of the school at large. The school outside of the rehearsal hall is really adept, and the students are very adept at using technology, and what we're finding is it's fundamentally changing kind of the nature of the ensemble classroom, while at the same time we're bringing in some very traditional things that have been part of band and orchestra rehearsals for forever. So that was one. The first thing we tried to focus on. The second thing that we've tried to focus on, as Dr. Hill kind of alluded to, is there's a large percentage of the school who are not involved in our traditional ensembles, and we were fortunate enough to have some people kind of get behind a little bit of at the time, maybe a little bit of a visionary kind of a program. So we have a very large program for music technology and production. We have 3 different classes, and the vast majority of those students are not involved in the traditional ensembles. We have several different levels that go through everything from live audio, reinforcement with microphones and sound reinforcement, and then we have another pathway that's a lot of digital recording, digital mixing. We do projects in film scoring or studio work or commercial work, and so there's a lot of opportunity there to really have this tremendous output of musical creativity that's not necessarily geared towards the traditional ensembles. When we first started it, I know one of the concerns we had, obviously, aside from the equipment needs and the monetary input to kind of get it off the ground, one of the things was that going to draw students? Was that going to pull students away from our traditional ensembles as we were a young school and we were trying to build from the ground up? Was that going to be something that actually became almost a competitive elective for our ensembles as we were trying to build? And what we found is exactly the opposite. They've been working very much in companion with each other, and now we have about 220, 240 kids involved in the band program, and then we have a whole other pathway through the music program that involves about 85 to 90 students in the music technology program, and I think that's only limited by the number of sections that we're able to offer in our master schedule. If we had more sections, I know we'd have a ton more kids. But what we're finding is there's a little bit of crossover between the two, just because the students who are involved in the band, if they have an extra elective period open, are very, very interested. But we've got a huge population of the school now that's finding really meaningful ways, for outlets for their creativity that weren't plugged into the traditional ensembles before. So it's been a very exciting pathway, and obviously as we're finding with technology, it's changing almost every day, but we're just trying to stay a little bit in front of that curve and offer these kids who have this amazing amount of talent and creative output an avenue through our music program. And that's not really something that, certainly in my experience, prior had been necessarily addressed very well. So we're really encouraging people to look at these alternate kind of pathways through the music program. And right now we've got 2 very, very viable pathways through our music program. One is the very traditional ensemble that we're looking at innovative ways of meeting the kids where they're at in terms of technology. And the second one is just developing ways of kind of democratizing access to our music programs. So it's been very exciting at Foster Ridge.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Dan, later we'll get a link from you that everyone can have so they can go and see some of these projects. Dan regularly posts online all the songwriting projects that his students are doing and these sorts of things. And also, you've got some footage of your bands working with technology as warm-ups and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. We've done everything from crowdsourcing in terms of composition. We've been using some different things through a great website that's been really useful for us called indavamusic.com, and it really allows students to collaborate globally in terms of composition. We use that not only with our music tech programs, but within the ensemble, and that's led to some really interesting avenues towards meeting kind of the improvisation standard in the ensemble by having some real-time collaboration with people all around the world. It's been very interesting, and once that door kind of opens up, it allows you to kind of have a whole lot of other possibilities in terms of how the ensemble can, how you can bring these avenues into the rehearsal. And what we've been finding is that it's been really deepening the understanding and the meaning that the students are getting in the large ensemble rehearsals when we do a Skype session with a composer of a piece that we're working on, or a collaboration with somebody from another school or around the world. It's been really exciting.
Thanks, Dan. I know you're going to stick around because there may be questions later.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
This is Becca. Yes, it is. Good morning, I'm Carrie Kowalski, one of Professor Hill's doctoral students right now, and I'm here to tell you about the portion of the week that involved a man named Ron Wakefield. Ron Wakefield was a successful studio and freelance musician in the Los Angeles area before he got the call to go back and become a teacher. He went back to school, got his teaching credentials, and in 1990 became the band director of North Park Middle School in Pico Rivera, California, which is a suburb on the southeast side of Los Angeles. His concert and marching ensembles reached an extremely high performance level. They were extremely competitive throughout the state, often beating high schools in various marching and concert competitions. In 1997, the marching band was the first middle school marching band ever invited to the Rose Parade, and in 2000, the concert ensemble was the first ensemble ever invited to the National Band Festival held annually at Carnegie Hall each spring. After Ron and the students achieved that level of performance quality, he sort of felt like, now what? Now what do we do? Currently, the North Park Middle School Band has a motto, and it reads on the back of all their little Kelly Green t-shirts, and it says, the North Park Middle School Band, leaving others better off than they were when we first met them. The program has 3 components: a cultural outreach component, a social outreach component, and a component which is called Kids Helping Kids. The cultural outreach component involves students marching in cultural parades. They no longer march competitively. They only march in parades that celebrate different cultures. Around the LA area, there's often these cultural parades. For example, recently, the students marched in a Korean parade. And surrounding these parades, Ron sets up an entire project. So prior to the parade, the students were split into small groups and they had to do research projects on different cultural elements of the Korean culture. And then one Saturday morning, all the students met at school to give their presentations to each other, and then they all enjoyed a nice lunch at a Korean restaurant where they all were forced to use chopsticks and really get themselves into the culture and embrace it. The social outreach component involves the top 2 bands of the program, the honor band and the advanced band, and they perform at places like senior centers, veterans homes, homeless shelters, facilities for abused children, and children's hospitals. These performances are interactive and they are entirely student-led, meaning the students conduct all of the pieces, the students announce all of the pieces, and oftentimes the pieces involve student soloists or duets performing. The ways the concerts are interactive is that during the concerts, the students get the audiences to either simply clap along, depending on which type of audience they're playing for. The audiences could clap along, or they pass out lyrics to some of the songs they're performing so the audience can sing along. And sometimes the students even pass out toy instruments to the audience so they can actually play along with them. But the main interaction happens after the performance. The students make an announcement following their last song saying, we're going to put our instruments away and then we're going to come out and visit with you. I was able to spend a lot of time with these students last semester, and what I observed during these interactions following the concerts was really some magical moments. Seeing 12-year-olds and 98-year-olds exchange stories and laugh and hug and kiss, and just the amount of joy and rejuvenation that I would see in these audiences was simply amazing. And what also was amazing was the fearless way in which these students just put their instruments away and just go right out and start up these conversations. I was so impressed by that because I myself was hesitant and nervous to go out and speak with these homeless people or these Alzheimer's patients or people that, we don't come into contact every day with in our life. The Kids Helping Kids portion of the program allows the students to go into homeless shelters, children's hospitals, facilities for abused children, and teach music lessons to these other children. The students raise the funds to purchase instruments for the children in these other facilities, and weekly the students travel in groups out to these facilities to themselves teach lessons to these other children. What I feel is most special about this part of the program is that then those children are often invited to participate in the activities with the band. So these homeless children or these sick and abused children will go with the band for a parade and spend the day in Disneyland. Or there have even been 2 times when these children were able to go with the band to the National Band Festival in Carnegie Hall and be. There's 2 different times where many homeless and abused children have been up on stage in tuxedos and black gowns in Carnegie Hall performing for the audience. I would think that would be pretty life-changing for those people. Ron Wakefield has developed a music education program that goes well beyond the intrinsic aesthetic education experience. To quote some of his students, his 11, 12, or 13-year-olds, they say they're using their music to bring joy and hope to those who need it most. They say they're using their music to bring peace to a very broken world. The symposium participants this summer said that when Ron came, the week definitely took a turn. They'd been refining their conducting and different pedagogical skills, but when the talk of social engagement and social justice came into play, many felt inspired to use these skills now towards a higher purpose. It was really awesome to see the change that so obviously took place in the participants and in the whole symposium once Ron joined us. That's what I have to say about Ron Wakefield.
Well, thank you and good morning. First, let me thank Gary for having the confidence in me to give me a call and ask if I could sit in for Frank Battisti, which were big shoes to fill. But it was a true joy, and I will tell you, just as we just heard, it was, for me personally, this was a life-changing experience because of the focus. And one of my assignments through all of this was to kind of, the last day, put a bow on what we had done and kind of look back and reflect on the week. And we've all been involved in those kinds of symposiums where you're just going at red line speed for the entire week, and then you walk away and 3 days later you're having a cup of coffee and you're trying to remember exactly what all the stuff was that you covered while you were there. So one of my goals was to try to focus on those things we had experienced and how we could integrate those into our daily skills. So a lot of what I talked about was validation and affirmation of what we claim to do and what we hope we do for people. And 2 terms that continue to come up in my mind, and they have become more meaningful to me in many ways during recent years, is, in truth, music is a human bonding agent. It's in our DNA, and that was kind of one of the points that I wanted to connect with them. The other thing that I wanted to do during that session was to help the participants to go ahead and identify some personal goals that they could take from the event. And the way I ended up doing that is, at the beginning, I gave each one of them a sheet of paper and said, as we go through this last session together, as something comes really to mind, I want you, by the time we finish, I want you to have written down 3 goals that are achievable. Not the great long-term, what you're going to be in 5 years from now, but 3 goals that would be achievable by you. And they were very beautiful and very important about doing that. What they didn't know was, at the end of the session, I took those back and we put them in envelopes with their names and addresses on them. And 4 months later, I sent them their goals. And just as a reminder, and I've heard back from several of them since that time. So we created this kind of continuing connection with those people in how we deal with things. And we talked a little bit about our daily task that we have to experience. And you know, we're kind of victims of our past and our heritage. We're about fixing stuff and getting things ready for the next day and for the next concert, and we forget that that's not really a reason we do what we do. It's just a vehicle that gets us to the real magic, that DNA in music that's so important. And so we talked a good deal about the fact that music is a lot more than citizenship, goal focusing, and team building merit badges. It goes far, far beyond that. And the 4 words that continue to come up in my mind, we'd go to a session, I'd come back and I'd just jot down 2 or 3 words. But ultimately, the 4 words that came into focus for me for this week were art, beauty, passion, inspiration. Art, beauty, passion, and inspiration. I think how few times we hear those words connected with pedagogy, with the next session on how we're going to make our marching band cleaner, faster or more winninger. And I think that the notion that if we can get to that point, there's this thing called the Yellow Board in Texas. I'm not necessarily proud of it, but it's out there if anybody's seen it. If not, don't look it up. I would be embarrassed if you found it. But I think one of these days, I'm going to go on that chat board and I'm going to see the word art, or maybe the word beauty, or maybe the word passion, maybe the word inspiration, and that certainly will make my day. But somehow or another, those are the things that I think we need to focus on. And it's missing in so many of the forums and seminars, workshops, and so forth that deal with music education pedagogy. Those are not words that come to mind. And as Gary asked me to kind of wrap this up, this session up this morning, on this part of this session, I thought about the fact, I am convinced that CBDNA as the organization can bring those components to the table. I don't think anybody else is going to. They're too busy dealing with it, and it's not a criticism at all, it's just an observation, but they're so busy dealing with the day in and day out task that we all deal with. This is a sidebar, Gary, if I may say it real quickly, but I was doing a residency at a university that will remain nameless, but at one point in that session, they asked me to do a session for all the music ed students. And I really focused on a lot of the things that we're talking about right now. Why it's important. I have a lot of anecdotal stories to tell with them and some of the testimony from kids that have been moved by music deeply. And at the conclusion, one of the music ed folks came up to me and said, "That was so wonderful. I'm so glad that you took the time to talk about those things, because we're so busy dealing with delivering content and sequence that we don't have time to talk about those things. We can talk about it. You can talk about it in your school. We can continue to have the kind of experiences that Gary so artfully presented to the people that were there. And I'm positive that we can have life-changing experiences for our directors through these kinds of events. And Gary, I'll turn it back to you at that point, and we can talk about the future. We've talked about the past. It's future time. So let's go.
Thank you. So we have some time for Q&A and also some thoughts. I'll just throw out that CBDNA as an organization probably should first and foremost help us achieve our professional goals. I'm not sure we always are as effective as we might be with that. We might creatively think more about how we can help our own selves, our own members, with their professional profiles, but that's outside the scope of this session. Beyond that, though, our goals have remained the same for 72 years since our founding, at least since our founders envisioned what we should be doing, and those have to do with serving our students, serving our community, serving the field. And so really the heart of what we're talking about is how we serve our field better, and the students that we have now who are going to go out and really create the field of the future. That's what this essentially is about. So if you first have questions or things you want to talk with either Dan about, Dan is still here, ask any of us, or just throw out some general thoughts. Let's start along those lines. I mean, this is a perennial debate. What could CBDNA do? And that goes perhaps beyond just going out and working the band next door 2 days before the clinic.
Yeah, Grant, to your thoughts, I'm convinced that there's just a critical disconnect between high school band directors and college band directors. Like you said, they want us to come work the band when it's time for festival, and there are people who aspire to be college band directors someday who are very much connected to what we do. By and large, there just seems to be a disconnect between, there was a time, if you go far enough back in our history, where the high school band, the college band was inspired to as a model for high school band directors. I don't feel like that's there anymore. There's just a disconnect, and I'm trying to get my hands on it, trying to get my head around it. Just wondering what your thoughts on that. Am I wrong? Is there not a disconnect?
Dan, what do you think?
Or what is it?
Gotta turn the sound down.
There we go.
All righty. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Excellent. I agree 100%, and I think our background as directors, I think that's where we go to first, and that's what's like the traditional ensemble, and we kind of are always worried about, you know, what is the product that we're putting in for our kids and providing that experience at a very high level. So I think that's what we know, and I think that's what, as band directors, that's maybe what our training and our background is predominantly in, is the traditional ensemble. And I think what happens is, and I don't mean to be critical of either my high school colleagues or my colleagues at the university level, but I think a lot of times we're stuck in an ensemble that maybe stopped existing 25 or 30 years ago. And the nature of the classroom, I think, at the high school level is very different. So I think there's certainly some innovative work happening from the university level in terms of the teacher training, how we go about training our future educators. Then there's also kind of a disconnect at the high school or at the school level with directors doing everything they can just to try to stay on top of everything that's being heaped on their plate. And I think it's just going to take people making the effort to kind of bridge that gap to move our ensembles and our profession forward.
Thanks, Dan. My own personal perspective is that it's perfectly okay if we have a different set of repertoire. I mean, I don't think the disconnect has to necessarily mean that we should all be playing the same things. That's just my personal take. However, all of the things we've been talking about have nothing to do with the specific repertoire. We're talking about the things we have in common. And I'm wondering if that isn't the part of the solution, Pat. It is that we think more about utilizing the technology we now have and engaging in things in our own communities that pull people together, and in that way have the same mission, whether or not we use the same specific repertoire or not. I don't know whether that's necessary. I'm not sure if that's addressing what you're talking about, but I think it's a part of it. Yeah, I don't know, but you know what? I know you weren't, but I think that's always there. I think that's a part of it, because I think that's been an enormous change over the last several decades, is in less and less shared repertoire, perhaps. Eric, you were going to.
I was at the workshop this summer. It was life-changing for me, and the thing that hit me was Ron's work, and I began to think, I've been doing this a long time. What have I been doing to help change the world? And I always go back to that statement, we teach often the way we were taught. And so how could I teach differently at the university that will affect my future teachers, particularly with social accounts? So I changed my entire syllabus. We have a social outreach department in there. No, they don't have to do it, that's the day of them. They just want to get the day they can make my department grow. It has been remarkable how the students have bought into that. It was a bit of a culture shift. My roommate John back here is smiling because I'm still struggling a little bit with that. But that statement of how we do it, I think may be a good way to connect with the future. That those folks, what we do in our classroom every day, how we lay our syllabus out, will be probably the way they teach. And we want to make this shift. That might be a fairly influential and way to do it. So that's my take on it. I want to thank Gary and the gang for doing this summer. It was an unusual one. Usually we go to these symposiums on how to play the high note on clarinet there and that kind of thing. And there was that element as well. We need that part of it. But this part of the heart and soul was really, really influential to me. So thank you.
Other thoughts, questions, comments for Dan or any of us or one another? Yeah, Jack.
Dan, I have a question, because this is what haunts me about this whole process, and maybe because I remember 30 years ago, I was a new guy in this organization, now I'm one of the old guys. So I have not a hard time with understanding what you're doing. I think it's terrific. I think what we've heard today is terrific. I had a music education prof come up to me and told me that the ensembles are dinosaurs, that we shouldn't be teaching music as an ensemble, that's not where kids are right now. Even garage band is even passe. But the idea, or passe, sorry, the idea is that who speaks for Beethoven and Mozart and Bach in this whole process? And I mean, we heard yesterday orchestras are going to go away, so the great art music, will it die in this whole process, or how in this process do we preserve that?
I agree. I agree 100%. And that what I'm finding and what I think my students are finding is that the experience of collaborative music making in the ensemble is becoming more and more and more important and valuable as it's almost a paradox, because as things are becoming more and more democratized and individualized, and more students are having access to creation of music, it's that experience in the ensemble that nothing else provides, that I think is even becoming more and more important as technology is moving to becoming to education, and certainly music education becoming more and more individualized. We're finding the exact opposite is happening within our ensembles, that it's that connection to great music. Within that component of the program, the act of collaborative music making of great music and great composers is providing something that is each and every day probably more and more necessary, and we're finding that it's deepening the meaning that we're having, that our ensembles are thriving. I don't want to say because of that, but I think the pendulum has swung maybe really far in terms of the area of garage band and new ensembles and creative outlets that in some places of the country the ensemble programs have been kind of neglected, and what we're finding is that pendulum is really swinging back, that the ensemble it provides something within our culture that you just do not get anywhere else. So I think it's been strengthening our ensemble programs, but what we're kind of talking about maybe is developing, like I said, that parallel pathway of involvement in the music program. We're finding our ensemble programs are thriving because of the experience that only ensembles and active music making can provide.
To Jack's, how many of you share with me at least one music education colleague who articulates or believes that same thing? Yeah, I know I have a person that continually reminds me that we won't exist in 10 years. And, I think that in some situations that might be true. But in other situations, traditional ensembles are actually expanding, like in dance, along with other things. And I think we have to be always very careful not to fall into the either-or trap. That's what gets us all in such big trouble. Life is a continuum, and we have to think both and. And I think that might be helpful for CBDNA as well. There was a hand up in back for quite a while.
I find I'm from a small Midwest university, and we do an honor band that caters to the small rural schools. So I have students that maybe have 5 in band here, or 6 or 7, and we do an honor band, and where my university band performs half of the concert and the honor band performs the other half. I think that repertoire is very important from the fact that we do some very difficult literature on that concert, but we also pull in grade 3 and grade 2 and grade 4 good solid literature from the past, like Charles Carter, those kinds of things that some of the band directors around do not do and do not hear. So that we try to pull that level up. We've had Overture for Winds played 3 or 4 times in the last 5 years because we've got it out there for them, So I think there's a connection there. Yes, we do the more difficult literature, but we also, in that particular concert, when those high school students are in, for the small rural schools, we do the literature that they can, and then put forth some of the old masters there.
I was just gonna say that some of you saw the Facebook thing I maybe put out about where do you think it's easiest to attain an aesthetic experience as an individual or in a group? And I'm thinking that, you know, the thing that hooks us with music is that aesthetic thing that takes us to that third dimension. And almost overwhelmingly, everybody said it was in an ensemble experience. It's in the group experience.
Yeah.
And I was trying to prove the professor wrong when I sent that out on Facebook, but I think that's what Dan was just saying, that
Yeah.
his students are feeling that as well.
Well, and there's actually chemical evidence that we're starting to gather that that's true. More on that another time. Tim?
Yeah, getting back to the Tika's concern about the connection with the directors out there, I think this is a great example of touching base with Dan, for example, and listening. You know, I truly feel that there's still this ivory tower kind of, you know, barrier that's up. And if we, are open and listen, we're going to learn like we are right now. And that I think, make connections, not strong.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. As a high school band director for 30 years, now college band director involved for I have a little perspective about, I don't want to offend anybody, but in my years in this business now, people who have no problem with the collegiality and working together, those who have been high school band directors or middle school band directors, for a length of time to mean something. I mean, I go back to Clarence Audio, who was probably my idol, and back in Kansas, anybody. And the other part is talking about outreach. Let's play golf together, let's play tennis together, let's do things together to bring us down the same plane, because we're all in education together. So my perspective is this is in the profession of teaching, and this is not what level we're in. I have one question, for Dan. What is scheduling? What kind of a schedule are you wanting in the school? Well, this is an important question for you. What kind of a schedule? Are you on a block schedule? What kind of schedule are you on?
Yeah, great question. We're on a modified block schedule. So on Monday, we have a 7-period schedule. On Mondays, we'll see each of our classes for 52 minutes. And then we have a Tuesday, Thursday block of our odd periods that meets for 94 minutes, and then a Wednesday, Friday block. So all of our ensembles, will meet 3 times during the week. 2 of those are 94 minutes, and 1 of them is a 52-minute. And then our music technology courses then are scheduled just like any other elective that meet that same amount.
Can I pick up just on something that Tim said, your term about being in an ivory tower? I think high school directors and middle school directors, I think I know them pretty well, I married them when I know them. But the fact, I think they do want to make connections. I think they really do. And I think we've created the ivory tower to a great extent. And I don't apologize for that because of the great artistic steps far we've taken. But maybe we just kind of need to meet them halfway, at least, because they're going to find it. I may walk out of this, sorry, I said it, one of the places they have found that connection is DCI. That's one of the places they look. And instead of to us, they look to them because there's a connection and they have an interest in it. So occasionally, I think we have to get off that ivory tower, right? And meet them halfway and then guide them to where we would like them to be in terms of the priorities we have for their art music.
This discussion could go on for a while, and I hope it will. We are actually technically out of time. We take maybe Marcellus, I think you, John, both of you have your hand up. I don't know if you want to fight over it, but.
I'm right around. In 10 years, this won't be around.
Right.
But the Stradivarius violin and the top-of-the-line clarinet will. One of the odd things, and I think Jack's referred to it, is that the growth of technology and the way it's isolating humankind is creating more need for the extra sensory experience that we have when we sit in an ensemble and we make music together. And there is something, even if you take it to the point where you start dealing with M theory and how they explain that, and string theory and quantum physics and the existence of the universe, and I don't mean to mystify music, it's a wonderful thing, but its place in our experience and our lives is becoming increasingly important, not less. For that reason, our organizations, our professional organizations, need to do a better job of stepping outside of themselves, where we're convincing each other of these sorts of things. It's the people who are proffering the science, technology, engineering, and math and wiping out the programs that need to hear more from us and need to hear this. Dan's going to be a floating holographic head 10 years from now. And I believe all of that.
Remember, he's still on mountain time, so it's still.
I thought he would enjoy it.
Thank you.
And that's my concern is as much as we know this and we're educating within our own ranks, and we're talking about outreach, and we're doing our outreach through what's currently available to us, that we're not doing enough outreach to the folks who have not been as accessible, the broader general public.
Thank you, John. I'd like to thank Serena and Carrie and Dick for their words and their assistance this morning, and a special thanks to Dan for getting up early and joining us. So as we fall back into tonal lust and musical love later on today, let's not forget all that we've started thinking about this morning. Thank you all very much for coming.